Hi, Beth.
Good afternoon, friends.
Good morning, everyone.
Glad to hear you got a nap in.
Who, me or somebody else? What?
You. I'm trying to think of what would, at 1:30.
No, I just ran upstairs and grabbed this tiny orange.
Time is relative anyway.
Okay, so it looks like everyone is here and connected. It is April 22nd. It's 1:30. This is a special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. And I'm stalling because I don't have the agenda open to read off of the or the right tab up. Sorry, everybody. Use the agenda to click on this link, so I'm kind of at a loss, but we're here to discuss a new public health order following what we've seen many of our neighbors do. It's a continuation of the discussion from Tuesday, where the metro area, including Boulder and including Larimer with some nuance, has adopted a plan where they're in a blue level restriction, different from the state's blue. It's 100% capacity, but maintaining 6 feet between tables. And then on May 16th, all capacity restrictions being removed. I know I've done some research and have some stuff to share, but I don't want to jump out and filibuster this conversation right away. Maybe the thing I'll start by saying is that I want to acknowledge that in our last setting, I was pretty excited and feeling the pressure about a pretty big change. And got ratcheted way up. And so I've done a lot of thinking this morning about how I'm here among friends and we're here among friends, and we try to be a bit more productive in this setting. Randy, I see you're unmuted. Tim, I see you're unmuted. I don't know who wants to set this off.
Yeah, I just want to say that when you described that Larimer County a moment ago, I think you said that they were 100% capacity until May 16th or 15th, at which time all capacity restrictions could be lifted. And I don't know how you lift them higher than 100%. So I wondered if that was a misstatement. I was kind of confused by the statement. But then before you answer that, as long as I've got the floor for a moment, let me say too that, and I did mention it the other day, both before and after our executive session, that, sometimes we're competing on ideas and trying to represent what our ideas mean. And so when I talk about something, whether somebody else agrees with the logic or not, there's never an implication that I think that my colleagues here don't care about the county. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the screen right now. And the people in it, and health, safety, and all those things. Sean's a firefighter. Would he be a volunteer firefighter if he didn't care about health and safety of his neighbors and citizens? And every one of us has worked on all these volunteer things. So, but every once in a while, when we're debating things and discussing things, there comes a point at which you just drive the lane for the basket and you put your best thoughts forward. And whenever I'm speaking about the logic or the potential for what a particular thing might do if I agree or disagree with it. It's not to cast an aspersion on what I think one of my colleagues would do to the county. It's about what the logic of the argument is in that moment, as we're, competing in this marketplace of ideas. So it's not personal.
Thank you. And I want to acknowledge I missed on the agenda, of course, a public comment session. Maybe before we go to public comment, I think would be good for everybody to hear from Dr. Ryan. I'm sure you've put some thought into this in the last 48 hours, and then we can open up public comment. And I can, Sean, if I can give you an opportunity to say something as well.
I don't have anything to add right now. Thanks.
So thanks everyone for being here. Just a couple things sort of before we get started. I think I've made it quite clear from day one what my primary goal and objective is, which is protecting the health and well-being of the citizens of this county. In addition to that, balancing the economics of it at the same time. And I think personally, we've done a great job of balancing those two, not abandoning one for the other. And similarly, I don't think now, and I don't think anyone has suggested we abandon one for the other. But I think what we need to do is work together and find a balance continue to find a balance, I should say, between those two things. And I just want to say, first and foremost, I think what we've been doing has worked. Our case counts, our hospitalizations, our fatalities, et cetera, is far less than many of the counties around us, big or small, and has maintained that throughout. At the same time, on the economic side of that, I think we've done a great job at balancing the economics of it. We've been at 75% capacity. I've heard nothing but one comment after the other about the strong economics of it, despite the pandemic over the last, as an example, 3 months or so, given our relatively limited restrictions. Right now, what I see going on across the country, and this has been true from day one, every one of my presentations has included a national, state, and local perspective. Why? Because not one of them should dictate what happens, but what happens in totality between all of those things, because we're all in this interacted together. We're not an island, and we're reliant on each other, both as a county and a state and a country. So when I look at things, I don't just look at Clark County's numbers. I look at what's happening more broadly in the state and what's happening more broadly in the country, because this virus, if it's taught us anything, things can spread quickly. And what goes on in Vermont on one weekend somehow doesn't have any impact on us. And suddenly we find that we have the first case of the UK variant. And now that's the predominant variant in our state and really running things. Right now, what I see in our country is an increase in case counts, an increase in hospitalizations. I see the same thing going on in our state. As I stated, we doubled our case counts in the last 4 weeks alone. Hospitalizations were now at over 600 individuals, and that was at 400 just 3 weeks ago. We're now at over 600 individuals in the hospital here in the state of Colorado. I also look at states that have lowered their mask mandate and a lot of the other guidance. Texas as a great example. Texas has increased over the last 3 weeks. Their case count has increased 1,000 people a day just in the 3-week period since they have removed their mask mandate. Is it gone up as high as people would expect? No. Why is that? Predominantly because if you recall several months ago, the rates in Texas were through the roof. So you have a significant chunk of the population in Texas who've already been affected. So it sort of makes sense why their case counts haven't gone again through the roof, because you have a significant number of the population who've already gone through that. Anyway, having said that, what I see is us right now in blue with, in my opinion, very limited or very small amount of restrictions. Our restaurants are operating at 75% capacity. That's going to go up here in the coming weeks to over 100% capacity once they close Minor Street and are able to utilize that space. What we're doing is working in terms of keeping our case counts down and everything else down. What do I think we should do moving forward? I don't think that we should abandon all guidance and all any restrictions whatsoever. If we do that, one, it will obviously open us up to potential increase in cases and hospitalizations and everything else. The other thing it will do, unfortunately, is make the mask mandate that we have paired this with all that more difficult to enforce. Because if people come in and they see that Clark Creek County, as every other county around us, has no restrictions, then why do they have a mask mandate? Why should I wear my mask if everything is open and everything is clear to go, to use the color that has been chosen? It's my recommendation that we stay where we are. We can tweak the blue level, meaning if retail stores at 50% are financially struggling, that we tweak that and we figure out what is that magic number for retail businesses. The way I see it, these are all sort of different, right? The restaurant industry is different than retail, which is different than other things. So if we need to tweak the level of blue to better accommodate the retail in this particular example, then I think we need to do that. I think abandoning all guidance and all restrictions while our case counts in this state are going up, while our hospitalization rate in this state is going up and across the country, I think would be premature. Do I hope to get to that point? Absolutely. In addition, we're currently at 30% vaccination rate in this county. And granted, vaccination rate is a sort of a moving target in that it is not completely accurate. Is it at 30%? No, it's higher than that. Do I think it's 50%? Absolutely not. So it's somewhere between 30% and probably 40% at the highest. Do I think that provides our county enough protection? I don't. Numbers have been floated from 70 to 85%. In Clear Creek County, what might work? Probably not the 85%. I don't think that is realistic. I think that's a significant reach. I think 70% is a reasonable number to attain, given that 30% has been sort of the low-hanging fruit. Getting that next 30 to 40%, I think, is going to take work, but I think we can achieve that. So I think moving to a clearer level, as it's called, I think we should hesitate and wait to get to that 100% and maintain the level that we are now with the potential for tweaks, and I'm certainly open to that discussion. A snapback, as the state has indicated, and granted, this entire conversation is in the context of it's confusing for everybody because the state has not gotten their act together yet, in the sense of we don't even know what the state's snapback is. Is it attributed only to hospitalizations? I don't know. The governor hasn't, and CDPHE has not yet come out with what that is. So it makes it very difficult for counties to make conclusive decisions on things and say, this is what we're going to do, only to find out in 2 weeks' time, the state says something totally different. I wish I had insight into what the governor is thinking, but I just don't have the mental capacity to do that. So that's my perspective. And I think any metrics we do use, as we've discussed many times, each one of the metrics that we have are flawed. None of them are perfect, right? Hospitalizations, fatalities, case counts, test positivity, vaccination rates, all of those are flawed variables. But I think in totality, if we look at them, as I have done from day one, in addition to what's going on more broadly in our state, I think is far more telling than, for instance, Jefferson County that says we're going to use hospitalization. Okay, well, that may work for Jefferson County, and I can't explain why Jefferson County only used hospitalizations. But I think that won't work for our county. I think looking at these variables in totality and understanding a broader picture of them, I think would be a better use of the data that's out there, and better informed decision-making that we make.
Thank you for that, Tim. I want to go ahead and open it up to public comment. So if you are in the meeting, click participants, click raise hand. We will bring you over. I do see one individual who is currently anonymous, and so I want to ask this individual to identify themselves and where they live, and then please make your comment. We'll hear you out. And you're currently muted.
Okay, Marty Gitlin, Silver Plume. There are a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has participated and worked so hard and diligently at keeping the citizens of this county safe. Dr. Ryan, the commissioners, and anyone else involved, EMS, and forgive me if I leave you out, but an admirable job that deserves the appreciation and thanks of all citizens. And if they don't, let them pick an orifice and insert something up it. So don't cringe, George. I've been on the Silver Plume Town Board for over 10 years on 2 separate occasions. I am on there right now. I think we have to also acknowledge a certain diversity within the county in terms of municipalities and unincorporated things. One of the things that we have not, or I don't know if we have, I missed a lot of the other day's meetings, as entertaining as it was. We did not, I don't think we have been able to quantify the length of the efficacy given the variants that keep popping up. And I've heard 6 months and maybe we lose some of the efficacy. I think to go in a direction that encourages more or less restrictive, and restrictive is, and I would also use sane, but that's a subjective evaluation. I think we should in no way abandon masks. I think we should maintain our 6-foot distance. And I don't think there is a need to rush to judgment and rush to the decision-making part of this process. I think we have very different priorities from our 2 neighbors, both to the east and west, and over in Gilpin, and we don't come in that much contact with Park County. But I think we do have to acknowledge the differences and priorities of the individual entities. I am disappointed in the state, and I thoroughly enjoyed Custer County's retributionatorial consequences of opening everything up and watching them hack up pieces of the commissioner's lungs, which I don't wish on anyone, but it was kind of justification. But I think we do need to examine just how long the vaccinations do maintain their efficacy. And I don't know whether that has been addressed. Hopefully, I think everyone is aware of it. And again, Dr. Ryan, thank you especially for the standards you're maintaining with our county. I know it's time to talk about the reasons for considering opening up again, but I know George mentioned the employment. We are seeking employment. We need people to work in this county. I don't see being realistic to think people are lining up at the bottom of Floyd Hill, the east bottom of Floyd Hill, to descend upon Clear Creek County to look for employment. I think they're going to the metro area. I think the county is siphoning off some of our employees because one, they are in horrible shape in terms of maintaining a workforce for a lot of reasons. But they're also in an attempt, they're also offering higher wages. So I think that if anything, we're moving people from our county or people from our county are moving. We are not moving. They're moving them.
Marty, something has happened to your audio.
I turned off his video to try and get his audio, so bear with me.
Yeah, my picture needs to go away. That happens at, hi Beth. The picture, I love that smile. It makes me feel like I'm immortal and invulnerable just seeing that smile. So let me finish what I'm saying. Get rid of my picture because I can't talk and look at me at the same time at our meetings. Can people hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. I also think that, Jeffco has one of the main things that we don't in flat land. They have different ways of utilizing their size, their population's age, their topography in terms of, boosting up their economy. So bottom line is I urge and maybe a more prudent than is necessary approach to this, because death is not a really driver of economy, and we only have one coroner, or we have one coroner's office and one funeral establishment in this county. And I don't think that testing out the capabilities of that wonderful facility that's being erected in Idaho Spring. Once again, I thank you all for the work and support you've done to bring that into this county, such a sorely needed resource. Thank you so much for, headlining that. But I strongly, strongly urge that we do not take any kind of action. I like the idea of a trial period, or whatever you want to call it, a hiatus of action between May and August. But I think we do need to have more vaccinations. I think we do need to have more data on just long-term efficacy, because the magnificent effort to produce the vaccine, it's a first, and there are usually glitches in first, and we've seen some. But the admirable ability of viruses to mutate and say, aha, you want us to go left, we're going to go right and get around behind you. It's great. It's like watching something that the Broncos should be able to do more. And I just think that given the fact that Summit went looser and then back to more restrictive, I think it's demonstrated that a prudent approach is, in my limited opinion and neurological function, is something that I would strongly, strongly advocate for. And again, thank you for putting in the work, and I like your new haircut, George.
Thank you, Mr. Gitlin. It's always good to hear from our municipal elected officials. I think next up is Craig Abrahamson. If you could identify yourself for the record and where you live, and we'll hear you out. And I haven't set, there's only 2 folks that want to make comments, so I haven't set a time limit.
I'll be quick. Craig Abrahamson, I'm a Georgetown resident, and I'm one of 5 owners of Cabin Creek Brewing. I'll echo most of Marty's opening remarks with regard to our thanks to our public health team and our emergency management team and everybody else who's worked so hard to get us to this point since last March. I'm going to comment directly from the business community's perspective in Georgetown. And then I'd like to touch on kind of some logic things, and I'll try, like I said, I'll try and keep it brief. The restaurants in Georgetown don't actually have a minor street. The majority of restaurants in Georgetown do not have a public right-of-way upon which they can encroach and increase capacity. The two largest restaurants in Georgetown don't have that option. They're not located on 6th Street, which was a pedestrian mall last summer and was subject of some varied opinion in terms of its popularity and usefulness. But I just want to point out that not every restaurant in Clear Creek County is on minor streets, so we don't all have that capacity advantage. Second, while the current dial status or structure that we have does say that we can operate at 100% capacity, you've heard this in the media too, only the very largest venues can actually get to anything close to 100% capacity with 6-foot distancing. We've done every table layout known to man at Cabin Creek, and 50% is the best we can do while maintaining 6-foot distancing between parties. So that's the limiting factor now, is the 6-foot distancing. And like I said, that's not just me. That's regularly published by the Colorado Restaurant Association and is expressed through surveys that they've done as well. I'd love to talk to the restaurant owners who are killing it right now and pick their brain a little bit, because I know for us, while we've done far better than we expected, we certainly we're not making money. We've spent tremendous amounts of money maintaining the capacity levels that we've had in terms of, outdoor seating through the winter months and things like that, as well as we never laid off a single employee. We felt like it was really important that they not bear the brunt of this, that we bear the brunt of it. And so it's been a very expensive endeavor for, I think, all restaurants in Clear Creek County to try and weather this, looking forward to the point when we would, have a solid rollout of vaccines. Finally, I want to touch on just consistency too. And I don't know who took the time to listen during the last meeting. Somebody mentioned Dr. Johnson from Tri-County Health. He was one of the primary drivers behind the regional approach that the metro area is taking. And I had happened to listen to the governor's press conference when they announced that kind of coalition and cohesive approach to this. He has sound logic, and I think that they use sound logic in the metro area to come up with this approach, which is why I, for one, support the resolution that's before you guys right now. The logic was, and I'm paraphrasing his points, the approach allowed for an extra month of vaccination effort between what was then April 15th and May 15th. His words were balancing thoughtful caution with the desire to reopen, create predictability and consistency across county lines, and create a path to full reopening. Pretty articulate guy, actually, and I thought he put that position well for what represents the retail industry in general and the restaurant industry and specifically what our goals and objectives are. No one wants to take a step backwards in this whole effort, but certainly, again, that balancing of thoughtful caution with the desire to reopen is what I think this resolution does. It has our support, and I think it has support of the majority of the business community in Clear Creek County too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Craig. Looking at the attendees list, I don't see anybody else who wishes to make public comment. Kind of just pause for a moment there.
Anyone on Facebook? I wasn't even looking.
We don't have any comments on Facebook, except for Corinne sharing our displeasure for the way that Tuesday's meeting was. So yeah, I think we've waited long enough. I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. And who wants to kick this off? I know, Sean, you haven't really said anything yet, so maybe you could start.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I tend to echo exactly what Craig said. And one thing I'd like to point out is putting us on this path doesn't mean that we're married to this path. I know that Tri-County and Jefferson County have tremendously more resources than we do. And I would fully expect if there is any movement towards a much more hazardous public health environment, that they are not going to stick with their May 16th commitment to be fully open and go to clear. They're going to do something that's in the public's best interest. And I think it would be easy for us to align with them if that ends up being the case. It would also be really easy for us to chart our own path if we really felt that that was appropriate to do based on the conditions on the ground here in Clear Creek. And I am hesitant for us to want to try and invent our own framework for this due to just the drastically lower amount of capacity and resources we have in order to fully analyze this and try to think that we're going to come up with something that's more thoughtful and more grounded in science than what Tri-County and Jefferson County have done. So that's how I'm feeling about it right now.
Okay, so I'll jump in here. First, I want to correct something I said earlier. I was under the mistaken assumption that the state's dial 3.0 blue is at 50%. It's not. It's 100% with 6 feet. So there's currently no difference between the restrictions in Clear Creek County and these other counties. I did do some research over the last 48 hours that I'll share with you all. So the counties who have adopted this public health order with a May 15th clear date are Jefferson, the Tri-County area, and Boulder and Broomfield, and Gilpin County. Denver County is currently in something that's very close to blue. It might just be blue. I didn't look at all the details. It maintains 6 feet. And Larimer County as well, their public health orders simply expire on the 16th. And I haven't had a chance to talk to them, either of those two counties, about what their intent is on May 16th. And I don't know, maybe I could throw that question to you, Dr. Ryan. I don't know if you've had any communication with those two counties, Denver or Larimer.
I haven't talked to Denver, talked to Larimer. I believe their intent is to, as a lot of counties are, sort of look at it month by month as they move forward, so that if things go bad, they can change it. If things go well, they can change it as well in the other direction. So that's their intent. Most counties that I've spoken to are on the same sort of trajectory. Let's look at this in a month block and make sure that we're making the most accurate predictions and accurate information on a month-to-month basis, and go from there.
Okay, thank you. And so I want to share this map that we've all spent too much time looking at. This is just the 2-week incidence rates across the state. And I just wanted to bring this map up while I talk about what I know about the counties to the west of us. Summit County has, I think, most simply describe it as stuck with the dial. They've changed the metrics up a little bit, but they've largely stuck with the dial. So has Eagle. And when you look at their case counts, you see the reason why. Routt County has dropped everything but the 6-foot requirement, and I think intends to be looking at the 6-foot requirement along the same timeline as the commitments from the Denver metro area. And I don't have a clear feel for what Pitkin is doing. I think I already mentioned that Gilpin County has basically adopted the metro area plan. That's my understanding. So that's the result of my research. One other thing, another difference between Larimer and, I don't know, the metro area, the rest of the metro area, whichever is the appropriate way to characterize that. They have chosen to use a broader set of metrics than hospitalization. They have, and I've got it somewhere here, they're using case counts, average positivity, and hospitalizations. I think it was 7%. Let's see here it is.
7.5.
7.5% positivity, and this is an and. So this is like if they hit all three of these, then their plan changes. 7-day incidence rate of more than 300 cases per 100,000, percent positivity more than 7.5, and no more than 60 hospitalizations. And I don't know how that compares on a per 100,000 basis. So that's the result of my research that I did. And I'm happy to take this time to kind of express my opinion now or leave it to others. Okay, so
Real quick, you didn't mention Grand County. Did you not get data from them, or was there a reason why you left them out?
I did not mention Grand County. Grand County does not have a public health order. They're not, or at least they don't show up on the map of public health orders. So my understanding from that is that they're 100% open, and possibly not even requiring masks at this point.
Yeah, I texted Rich and I'll let you know if I hear anything different.
Okay. And that's also kind of a sum of, I'll just share this too. This is a map of which counties have public health orders. And so you can see we have information about most of the counties that have public health orders that, you know, are at all epidemiologically linked to us. I mean, I guess, you know, Gunnison, San Miguel, people drive through us to get there. But I did not reach out to those counties or look into them. And so, you know, my opinion, I think that it's the communities and economies to the east of us that are more closely tied to us, both economically, we compete for labor down there, and epidemiologically, I think that and this is not the result of a regression analysis. I think our case counts have tended to track closer to the metro area than the communities to the west of us. And it's because we don't have the hotels. We're not a resort community. There's probably other reasons there too. So it's really hard for me to, I view May 16th when Jefferson County goes to clear, if they do, you know, as another significant economic wound if Clear Creek County continues to have capacity restrictions while Jefferson County does not. It's above and beyond the economic wounds that I've been willing to accept so to date, which is just having lower capacity and having less customers and all of that. The labor market in the service industry is really tough. And I'll acknowledge, I think Marty made a good point that we don't have employees knocking down our doors. It's not like we're gonna open to 100% capacity and the restaurants are gonna have access to the employees they need. It's gonna require planning and coordination to overcome this. And that's why I think giving the signal soon, that's why I have urgency, is because I want to give the signal soon to that industry that they can start to build plans and invest and make investments in attracting the labor that they need for us to recover from this. And I know I said this yesterday or on Tuesday, dropping restrictions in the middle of May is not my preference. My preference is that we continue to have restrictions statewide. When our neighbors drop their restrictions, I think that it puts us in a really unfortunate position where I don't think local restrictions can do all that much. Local capacity restrictions can do all that much to protect and stop the spread of COVID in our community. We have 3,000 constituents, citizens of Clear Creek County who don't interact on the west end of the county hardly at all. They're in Jefferson County, right? And they're more epidemiologically tied to Jefferson County than to the west end of Clear Creek County. And so I'm not under any illusion that we can cordon off our section of the swimming pool. And I don't think that that's a zero. I don't think that restrictions could do nothing. But I don't think that they'll do enough to justify the additional wound that would be inflicted upon our industries if they're not allowed to start recruiting for employees at the same time as the rest of the labor market. So I think I'll just stop there. I would love to, I think we do need to get into the details about what our metrics would be. But I think, understanding where each other's at is a good place to start. And I'll stop there.
So were you suggesting we go into those metrics next, or
No, I'm not. I'm acknowledging that we haven't heard from you where you're at. And so.
I don't want to get in the way of the chair and the agenda, I think, but if we have time, I think I'd go ahead and, I have some thoughts also, but I think because I want those thoughts to be as well informed as possible, and there's some really interesting concepts that Tim and my colleagues and Craig and, everybody's brought up. I had a couple of questions they're really questions for Tim, I think, first. And certainly with all due respect to your comment about our inability, and I know you said it's not an absolute and universal, George, when you said that about our local actions having, I would say, limited effect to protect us rather than no effect to protect us. And I think you made that clear. If people around us, or at least some of the people that border us, choose a far less restrictive route. My first question is for Tim. Tim, do you agree, for example, that if the Denver metro area chooses to go to a wide open, clear state, that our ability to protect ourselves is significantly limited, and that to do other than what they do is of little benefit to our health safety?
One thing that we are not in Clear Creek County is in the same boat as Tri-County Denver area. They're a good 15 to 20% ahead of us in vaccinating their citizens. If you look at the map of vaccination rates, it's 50 plus all the way to 65 plus percent of their population is vaccinated. We're nowhere near that. So May 15th or mid-May makes sense for them. In that, are they anticipating another 10 to 15% of their folks vaccinated? Likely in the next 4 to 6 weeks, for sure. To answer your question, I don't. I think we've been sort of doing our own thing the whole time, right? We've had local restrictions that we felt have directly benefited and protected our citizens in the workforce here. And that's why we've kept them in check the whole time, and regardless of what Summit or Jefferson on either side of us do. So I do think that local restrictions and local guidance has done a lot for us and would continue to do a lot for us regardless of what goes on around us. I am by no stretch of the imagination suggesting at this time that we increase in any capacity restrictions. To George's point, is it really about restaurant workers, right? And because most of the retail, are they really hiring additional folks? I don't know the answer to that question. Or is that recruitment really within the restaurant industry alone? It's not all the other businesses that are in Clear Creek County. I do think that local rules and guidance will give us a level of protection, regardless of what our neighbors do, to answer your question simply.
All right, thanks. I had another question, but I forgot what it was. It's common to me these days. It seems to be directly correlation to the color of my hair.
The answer is 34.
My wife insists that as much stuff as I say around the house all the time, she wishes I had a memory problem. It's not that. There's just too much stuff in there right now rolling around. And I know that's true for my colleagues as well. And pretty much everybody on this page. We've had a lot of stuff to think about for the last year. The first thing I want to do is address the idea of who we're similar to and who we're not. And there is no absolute answer to this, and there's no right. There's, it's not like anybody that said anything in the last meeting is right or wrong about whether we're more like this or more like that person. I would point out that I think that Summit County is more, if you put this on a linear scale, it's kind of interesting. I think Summit County is more like Denver than we are in some respects. They have a population that is between our population and Denver's population, not geographically, but numerically. They have a lot of diverse and larger, their economy is larger than our economy and smaller than Denver's. The kinds of economy and the diversity of their economy is perhaps not much greater than ours, except that they do have the hotel industry, which certainly increases their exposures more because they have people that come and stay. I would say, though, that we have people that come through us, and certainly many of them go through us without stopping, but many of them do stop. And there are more people that go through us than go through Summit County. And there are more people that go through us than go through Eagle County. And they come from these other places. That's mitigated by the fact that they go to Eagle County and Summit County and stop and mingle for a week or a day at a time, as opposed to coming a week or more at a time. Not all of them. A lot of people day trip to Summit County, but a lot of people come here. And that's been the focus of a lot of our conversations over the last year. So I think that and I will also say that we're all familiar with the things we know because it's what we see. And I agree that from a commingling of density of contacts and people, our proximity to Denver makes us certainly far more generally, in terms of workforce and everything, common to Denver. But as a person who has lived in Clear Creek and in the construction industry and worked in Denver and worked in Summit County, I can tell you that there's a rush, there is an actual rush on the highway every morning headed to Summit County from both Clear Creek and from Denver. And some of that is cleaning hotels like my wife used to do. And some of that is going to wait tables. And some of that is going to construction. And I can tell you that half the subcontractors that I hired in Summit County came from Denver because there was so much construction going on in Summit County and other stuff going on in Summit County that they, like us, didn't have the ability. So there's actually, I think, I believe, contrary to the other statements I've heard, that there are more, if you add up all the similarities, there's more similarities in terms of actual contact and stuff, that we have more similarities to those mountain communities than we do to Denver. And when I walk outside and realize that we're, 83 or 4% public lands with a few small communities and very small resources and population, that exposure of a small population to a larger population is more similar to what they see there, even though the ways in which that contact happens are different. I also agree, as a business person myself for 40 some years in the area, I'm really sensitive to when times are harder because stuff happens. And so I do think I'm also really sensitive to what both of my colleagues have said about, and what Craig said about what it means to the businesses. But that's been true throughout the last year, and I'll reiterate something we've said for a long time, which is we've been, I'm beginning to hate sports and military and all kinds of metaphors as much as everybody else. Kind of like the old Western ones still. You see me use those a lot, but we are at the 2 or 3 or 4 yard line in terms of our ability to protect ourselves through the greatest measure, which is that mythical herd immunity we've been looking towards. We did figure out, and I'll acknowledge a long time ago, that achieving herd immunity through getting sick is not a good policy because it means millions and millions of people die along the way to get there. And so the vaccines that we waited for so long to do it the intelligent, humane way have arrived, and we're making progress. Unfortunately, in this county, we've not had as good a progress as some of the other counties for various reasons. And our public health department, George Marlin and others have been working their butts off on some ideas that we've had, some of us brought by us on the county commission over the last few months, are coming to fruition now that we've picked off the low-hanging fruit through public and social media outreach. And there's a really great program going on that should accelerate our ability to get to everybody we can and reach saturation on that soon. So with regarding to introducing not only somewhat arbitrary dates from our metro area partners, obviously, who don't all totally agree with ourselves, looking at Larimer, for example, I think we're a little more unique in that all of those counties are gigantic and we are small. And so therefore, some of the criteria like death rates and hospitalization rates are almost meaningless for us. They're not usable and workable for us. To look at the hospital, even the death rate notwithstanding, just leaving that alone, I'll come to something that seems more usable in terms of its numerical value without being anecdotal. A hospitalization rate, to try to use what they used it with Tri-County, which is 5 hospitalizations per 100,000, which means something in Jeffco, because that's, that's around 30 hospitalizations for 600,000. That would be, that's a lot less. That's a little piece of a person here. If to get into purple, 5 hospitalizations per 100,000 puts you into purple, which means the restaurants are closed. They don't have any indoor dining, they're takeout only. And I would point out that that is a half of a hospitalization in Clear Creek County equals 5 hospitalizations per 100,000. And so that's obviously not a metric that even is useful to us unless we change the metric and say that it's okay to have 1 or 2 or something like that. So it seems to me we got to get to a number of things that is like case counts and vaccinations to have a usable metric. And then we have to look at, like Dr. Ryan said, what's happening in the county and what's happening around us with regards to all of those metrics. And we can look at those other metrics when we get outside of us and we look at 600,000 people in Jeffco and we can think about Jeffco's hospitalizations. So my recommendation would be that we follow Dr. Ryan's idea of trying to modify this, because the way it's currently written, and other statements supportive of it notwithstanding, the way it's written now works great for us, is that 1 hospitalization out of this county would close the restaurants by the metrics laid out in this public health order. And I don't think that's right. And so I think we work with something and let Dr. Ryan, and I'm not sure he's gotten there yet, but he was talking about creating a kind of a calculus problem, a synthesis of external and internal influences on the health side, so that we're now balancing health and economy. And then I think the other thing is we have to acknowledge that we've had something of a failure in part of what we've tried to do, which is reaching an appropriate percentage of our people to be vaccinated to achieve a herd immunity that could allow you to become comfortable with something like clear. And my guess is that might not be May 15th. It might be later in May, but that's a wild guess and I don't know. And it's going to take the people that are doing the outreach in our revised, rejuvenated outreach method. And it's an all hands on deck, full board, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, find everybody in this county if we have to do phone banks or whatever, and get them vaccinated so that we can do what we've been saying we're going to do all along, which is ensure our safety level in order to have our businesses open. And it's the charge of everyone on this screen and a whole lot of other people that aren't on this screen to make that happen. And setting a date's fine. My preference is to have a herd immunity vaccination level or something that Dr. Ryan tells us, a combination of that and other measures in front of us. So I think the sequence would be to find out what that health criteria is and set that metric up in that equation. Set a vaccination goal in terms of percentage and decide what that is to be able to do something more like what we're seeing this thing presents. Set a target date to achieve that and make ourselves responsible for achieving it. go to a full bore effort to achieve that vaccination effort, or whatever those other metrics are that Dr. Ryan is able to inform us. That's why we hired him. And then as that date approaches, reevaluate in terms of both our success in meeting those metrics locally to achieve that firewall around us to keep us safe. And then look at the state, federal, regional, and local trends and see how it's working in these other places and where they're landing at. Take a good look at the variants, which Dr. Ryan can advise us on, and then see if we're going to reach it by that date. I do think the date should be set aggressively to give ourselves to set a mark in front of us that says you failed if you don't reach this and you don't get this level of firewall and vaccinations. And then if we see a clear path or a similar condition is appropriate, and even Dr. Ryan, even Tim says, okay, I'm all right with going to clear now. I'm all right to going to 100%. We still want to achieve some level of social distancing, the mask order still in place, whatever it is, that all of our businesses understand that when we hit that date and we go there, that the trends that we see going forward, both locally, regionally, and beyond, can always, we all know this, can create an adjustment that we're going to have to make later if the whole thing blows up on us and we were wrong. And, but hopefully, you know, it seems like as we reach herd immunity or some reasonable expectation thereof, we're going to be okay. And then, but I completely agree that we should set this incredibly aggressive goal to achieve, to catch up to the metro area and catch up to everybody around us in terms of vaccinations. That's our failure point. We need to solve it. It's our responsibility. We failed. We need to fix it. We need to get there, and we need to do it on behalf of our own safety and our businesses. So the way it's written right now, I'm not happy with. I'd like to see the overriding criteria to be that we've reached those health metrics, and but those health metrics have a goal in front of us that is accelerated and given a 100% commitment because of those economic goals of reaching that by that date. You know, Memorial Day is May the 31st, and we've used Memorial Day, spring break, Christmas, all these different times, July 4th, throughout the last year. I like using that as a carrot on a stick in front of us to motivate us to get it right, be humble, listen to each other, no matter what we think is right, and figure out how to get out to those people and make sure they're vaccinated. And then at some point, when we recognize that we've contacted every damn person in the county, and the only people that aren't vaccinated are the ones that said hell no, well, then we've got to make some real hard decisions and say, maybe you guys are on your own. You know, we can't hold up the economy for people who refuse to stay healthy themselves. And so that's just my general reaction to this whole thing and the conversation that's taken place. And I mean, nothing I said with any disrespect to anybody here with regard to what they thought.
I had a quick comment about just the concept of tying our fortunes to vaccination. First off is, I, for one, don't believe the numbers that we have. And I don't see a certainty that we're ever going to be able to believe the numbers anytime soon. And the other thing that I observe is, I don't think that we've had any substantial outbreaks in Clear Creek County, even when there was no one vaccinated. I mean, we've had a couple fairly small ones here and there. So it doesn't logically follow to me that that's what we should hang our hat on. It also doesn't, none of them are good. I mean, which kind of makes me wonder out loud if maybe we should pursue a more nuanced approach, which is rather than trying to set a criteria which we don't really have the ability to accurately measure or fully understand, that we leave ourselves a little more latitude as a board of health to make adjustments to our policies going forward. And I know that kind of flies in the face of providing the business community with regulatory certainty to say, hey, when X happens, Y is going to follow. But I think it's something at least worth investigating, rather than trying to engineer a solution that we really don't have the resources to be able to engineer, in my opinion.
Randy, I see that your hand is up.
I just wanted to say, and not in rebuttal to what you said at all, Sean. I think you brought up a thing that I kind of left out. I had a conversation with Tim earlier regarding that. We talked about exactly that thing. And I think I brought up in the meeting the other day as an example is over on the east end of the county where you live, having actually run into this exact same problem before with regard to zip codes and things like that. There are some issues with regard to the reliability. And I think that's probably best suited mostly left to Tim to try to understand because he and his crew have been managing the understanding of that data. But whether it is to say we're going to get that data corrected or whether it is to say our best guesses are that in this region of the county we have this issue, in this region we have that issue, so that we adjust what that herd immunity goal is. I'm not suggesting it's be absolute and 70 to 80%, and then we have to make some questionable data match an empirical epidemiological goal. I think that's all part of the conversation that we have as we, and part of the, first of all, the conversation we have now in setting the goal. And then excuse my cough. And then as we get there, and it means nothing, by the way. And then as we get there and do that reevaluation as we near the goal, we're going to have better information about that, and we continue to be new. And I think what I'm saying is pretty nuanced. I think I'm suggesting that we try to maintain a balance between economy and health, and we don't dismiss the best health information we have. It's just the best that we have, but we try to improve on it. So I think we improve that information. But secondly, we are on an absolute goal. This is like the Normandy Beach on behalf of our businesses. We have got to reach whatever that level is we choose is appropriate. We've got to reach that goal and go for it. And that's all I was saying. So thanks.
Couple things. One, as I indicated at the onset, to Sean's point, every one of these variables is less than perfect, less than ideal. I can't make up new variables. It is what it is. That's why I suggested we use them in combination with each other rather than any one individual metric. And we set them to a level that is sort of to your point, Sean, what was our worst case scenario as far as case counts? And what was our worst case scenario in terms of hospitalizations and fatalities? And set those as sort of snapback. And there's two, in my opinion, there's two issues here. One is, how do we move forward towards clear or transparent or whatever color it is? And what would bring us back, right? Those are two different things, in my opinion. And I think what Larimer County and all the other counties have chosen, and we've been discussing, is their snapback. If we hit this amount of hospitalizations, we're going back to restrictions, we're going back to yellow. Right, Larimer County has chosen a combination, as I just described, of a number of different variables because hospitalizations alone, you hit that point and it's sort of too late to react in a meaningful way. And so I think those are really the two questions here, in my opinion, are one, do we want to agree upon what moves us forward towards clear? And what do we agree upon what moves us back? If that case happens. As far as the vaccine and vaccine challenges around the data, we do have a workaround. Actually, one idea that I have is to take the zip codes, for instance, that straddle both Clear Creek County and Jefferson County, that include Evergreen. I can potentially get from the state and understand what is the vaccination rate in that zip code. Right. And there's no real reason for me to believe that the Jefferson County side of that zip code is going to be significantly different from a vaccination rate perspective than the Evergreen or the Clear Creek side of that. Right. So that can get at some of the data issues. I think the data issues around vaccines are ubiquitous across the whole state. I think it's showing up far more in smaller counties where 200 people can have a significant impact on our number that you're never going to see in Denver or Jefferson County or anywhere like that. And so there are workarounds to the data challenges with vaccination rates. but I think we can overcome most of those in terms of what the state can offer us and what we can find in the data. So that's really where I would frame this discussion of what do we think we should do moving forward or to get us towards clear, and what would bring us back in the other direction.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I know I said I wanted to move us forward into the details, and you guys have embraced that, and thank you. Now I'm gonna just, there's something I meant to say that I didn't. And I just want to talk a little bit about like what our policy goal is and has been. And this is just my perspective. Last March, a year ago, it was hospital system breach. We wanted to avoid that catastrophic hospital system breach. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I think we may have achieved that goal. I know that we have, as a state, vaccinated a lot of the most high risk folks. And so I don't know, I mean, obviously that's why we see hospitalization rates as a continuing metric, because I can't predict the future. And if we get anywhere close to breaching our hospital system, then it's justifiable to do things that I never considered when I was running for office, like tell people when they can and can't go into a restaurant. Then we had a goal that is keeping rates low, because when you just live with chronic high rates of a virus, that virus mutates and you get variations, and trying to avoid variations. That is still very much a threat in my mind. However, I don't think that Clear Creek County can hit that goal as one community. I don't think that stricter rules in a community of 10,000 have much impact on the probability of continued variation when you've got 60% of the state's population that's about to be in clear. And so I don't really know, I mean, what our policy goal is, because I don't think that it's incumbent on government to tell people for their own personal disease contagion risk that they can't go into a restaurant. And that's why I kind of fall back on the hospitalization as the metric that really is kind of continues to be our North Star. And I know that that's a complicated metric for Clear Creek County, given our population. One thought that I had was that we could acknowledge that our hospital system is in Jefferson County and adopt, basically count our population and their population, and then have, you know, a per 100,000 rate that maybe it's one digit higher. So that we know as a way to get at how close we are to breaching our hospital system. And I'm not really, I would call that a bad idea that might generate a good idea or something like that. I have no intention of insisting there. A thing I would love to have come out of this meeting, I also do not want to override our public health director, and I don't want to take a 2-to-1 vote. I really don't want to do that. I want us to get to a place that we can agree. I hope as an outcome to this meeting, we set a goal like Randy, you referenced, and I think that goal should be May 16th. And it's a hard goal to meet, but I will point out on vaccinations that just a couple of things, and thanks for mentioning the reliability challenges in our data. Another reliability challenge in our data is that we've gone out of our way to vaccinate our workforce. Our workforce, 75% of them historically don't live in this community and don't end up in our statistics. And Tim, correct me if you think I'm wrong, please. I think the primary vector into our community is someone getting sick that works in the service industry where they're in high contact with people from all over the place, then going to, you know, somewhere and getting somebody else sick in our community. I think that's the primary vector. And I think that our vaccination statistics will never show that we've tackled that vector. And I'm not saying I think today we have tackled that vector for sure, but I do know that we've vaccinated around 500 of our frontline staff. And I was making phone calls to get businesses to register. So the other thing I know is that maybe half of the businesses I contacted had already gotten vaccinated somewhere else.
Right. Right.
So, those are just things I want us to keep in mind. I would embrace sort of the Larimer County model of combining case rates, test positivity, and hospitalization. And then maybe we could throw a fourth one on there that says, oh, and by the way, all of this goes away if we think we've hit a vaccination level that Dr. Ryan is satisfied with.
I think I like a lot of what you said. I still think that only because of the numbers, and it's not a debate or an argument or anything. It's just the hospitalization thing is so difficult to achieve for us. We'd almost have to look at regional hospitalizations. I don't think we should try to just lump ourselves in with Jeffco. I think we are dissimilar for so many reasons, but I do think that the hospitalization thing is very difficult to look at, and we might look at regional hospitalizations. And I think that's all part of the calculus that Dr. Ryan was working out. And I was just looking at the calendar and thinking forward to some really critical dates, like, first of all, I'm going to look at an economically critical date, the Memorial Day weekend, which is May the 31st. And our last meeting before that is May the 25th. And of course, we can't just readdress this on May the 25th. We have to be thinking all the way along every week before that to understand it. My thinking is we have identified at least a couple of flaws in this particular health order right now that need to be rearranged. Even if we didn't add the metrics in that Tim talked about or I talked about, there are some things in it that need to be fixed, like how does one hospitalization closes the restaurants and puts it in purple according to the metrics in these charts and in the, how it's spelled out. So I think there's some rectification that needs to be made. I think I do agree with setting an aggressive goal in front of us to achieve things like getting the rest of our critical online workforce that would be exposed by virtue of making this change vaccinated, to aim for whatever that goal is that we think herd immunity is, to better inform that by understanding how many people really are here, getting some more real hard confidence of what that number is here, what our real vaccination rate is. I would suggest that we would try to say that between now and the next 5 days, by the 27th, have figured out what that equation looks like, so that on the 27th, on Tuesday, we would have something in front of us that actually makes sense that we could vote on and set those goals and decide what that calculus is that incorporates health into it also. And I kind of leave it to Tim to that, working with any of us. And of course, I'm sure none of us would have phone calls and emails with Tim between now and then. So that we're ready to vote, which then puts us 4 weeks out from the Tuesday before Memorial Day. And then I would suggest that no later than by 5/18, we have analyzed our progress towards that goal and powwowed in a public meeting to discuss where we are and if we're ready then to prepare to approve that opening on the 25th, to be open within a day or so after that. If we've achieved the goals that Tim and all of us are in agreement with, put us in that place of both health and justification, so that those businesses, and that's our goal, and the businesses know that's our goal, but it's going to take everybody on deck, including those business owners that want to help, to find those people and get them vaccinated, everyone, so that we can achieve our goals and be open prior to Memorial Day, if we can achieve the goals. And it's an aggressive goal to say in 4 weeks, we're going to move from maybe 30 to 40% to up around a realistic expectation that we've hit, 70% on the vaccination side. And that doesn't mean we have 70% according to the state. It means we have 70% according to all the kinds of things that Sean and Tim and all of us have talked about, which is the uncertainty surrounding this, that we've made our best guess. And I don't know if Tim agrees with anything I just said, because I just made it all up sitting here. But I just started while we were talking, and I agree with lots and lots of what George and Sean said. I was looking at the calendar and trying to count backwards to figure out how these businesses, that we should set our goal to have those businesses open before the summer season that they rely on so much, and which will save some of those businesses, can get there, with the understanding that everybody knows that to do that, we have to achieve, a real verifiable safety level. And the only thing I disagree with, I think adding in vaccination rates at some level into the equation making sure that they're realistic and fair assessments of those vaccination rates. And the hospitalization thing is however Tim can figure out, we can factor that in, because obviously 0.1 person in 10,000, is like one person in 100,000. And one person in 100,000 throws us off at color level. And when you get up to 5, you're done, which is why we're sitting at double purple when we have one full hospitalization is double purple, which would close the restaurants down according to what it says in this thing right now. So, and I don't know if Tim, if you figured any of those things out already, but within 5 days, do you think it's realistic that you can have a workable thing in front of us that we can vote on and vote yes for with confidence that it has those safeguards and fail safes built into it? And then secondly, do you think it's a realistic goal to say if it's all hands on deck and our number one priority in the county over the next 4 weeks is achieve what we and you reasonably believe is an effective herd immunity to justify clear, can we get there in 4 weeks, do you think?
The answer to your first question is yes. The answer to your first question is yes, I agree with a lot of what you said. The answer to your second question is yes, I think in 5 days we can have that ironed out. And your third question, in whatever threshold we set and agree upon, we also know, for instance, I wouldn't choose 85% because that's one, not realistic. And we know to our prior discussion, our number is higher than whatever we estimate it to be, right? It's going to be higher than that. So choosing something like 60%, I know will put us somewhere between 65 and 70% in reality. So
that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah,
that's exactly the kind of criteria I meant.
Yeah, one point I wanted to raise, and I think it's important because people hear things and they fix it in their mind. And then when things change, because that's the reality, they have a really hard time with it. And I want to address something that George said. Our most vulnerable population 14 months ago was 70 plus. That has changed dramatically. They are no longer, obviously, because they've been vaccinated and they are taking an abundance of precautions, even though they're vaccinated. The people in the hospital, in our hospital rate in Colorado is going up. It has been for 2 weeks now. And it is not 70 plus individuals. It's 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds. So, yes, we've protected the 70 plus, but that is our new vulnerable population. And they're going into the hospital at an accelerated rate that 14 months ago, we never would have guessed. But the virus changes, as you all know. It's constantly mutating, and it's now doing things that it didn't do 14 months ago, right? It's putting healthy 30-year-olds in the hospital, and actually a healthy 14-year-old in the hospital that my wife's research partner is dealing with in the ICU. 14-year-old healthy, suddenly COVID, and now she's in the ICU. So our vulnerable population has shifted. And that's what I mean by, people focused on the 70 plus, oh, we've taken care of them, all is good. Well, no, we have taken care of them, but now the vulnerable population has shifted, right? And it's going to continue to shift, and it's going to continue. And I know I've stated this before, the under 12-year-olds are not going to get vaccinated anytime soon. They're not going to get vaccinated likely until next year. And I know right now, they're not our vulnerable population, and they are not being affected or impacted the way that 30, 40, and 50-year-olds are now. But 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds weren't impacted the way they are now 14 months ago. So I'm always trying to think more globally and more broadly than just those we protected and those who could be protected, right? We still have a 25% of our population who won't have any protection anytime soon. And so it's not only protecting everyone else, but it's really about protecting them moving forward. So, and then finally, I'll say to Craig's point, as I stated in the beginning, there is room in all of this to adjust things. So if it's not 6 feet, do we feel comfortable, and do we think that putting a 4 foot or a 3 foot distance could potentially, obviously it's going to increase the potential for number of people in the restaurant, but do we feel that it's safe enough to protect those people who are in there, while at the same time increasing the number of folks who can eat and patron your restaurant and or shop, right? So it's again, trying to balance the economics of it and the health of it simultaneously, and not trying to forego everything on either side of that, but really trying to work together and come to a meaningful agreement that, okay, we feel this improves economics significantly, and we feel it doesn't decrease protection and health benefits significantly either. And that, in my opinion, is a win-win for everybody, where we're trying to balance those two things.
I have a couple things to weigh in on. One of them is, I think this is a really interesting conversation, but I also think it's something that applies equally to Tri-County and Jeffco, which has probably been debated ad nauseum down there and led them to where they are. And I think in some ways their environment is more hazardous than ours, right? They have more multi-generational households than we do. They have congregate housing that we don't have as much of. And then the last thing I'll say for now is, I actually don't like tying our fortunes to any per 100,000 number, because we're such a small county that even with the case counts, we were jumping multiple levels based on one household getting infected, which we know isn't necessarily tied to increasing the public risk in our county. It's just a consequence of the way that the numbers work with being in a small county. And back to what I said before about maybe giving ourselves a little more credit and using a little bit more judgment. There was a pretty famous conversation that happened in Congress some years ago where they were having a long debate about what pornography was. And somebody said, I think you'll know it when you see it. And I think that same philosophy applies here. I think we'll know if it's time to make a change. And to the point about Memorial Day being an important date, I agree with that. But I also don't think it would be realistic for us to expect our business community to be able to pivot in a period of 72 hours to be able to decide whether they're going to open up fully or not. And I kind of like the idea of using that May 16th date, which has enough time to allow them to plan adequately. And I think we've already, I don't know that we need to do any additional all hands on deck with vaccinations. I don't really feel like we're leaving any stones unturned right now. And I feel like we're doing our best. And I know we're going to make some progress, but again, a lot of that is potentially out of our control. Whether the state gives us 1,000 one week or 100 the next week isn't something that we can go to the bank on.
Well, I would disagree that we've done everything we can on. We've done an unbelievable job of orchestrating incredible vaccine clinics, and we've tried to get the word out a lot of different ways, but I think the methods through which we've chosen, I got a call today from somebody who was looking for a ride down to try to get some funding because they've been out of work since COVID and had issues trying to get back to work and everything. And I wasn't able to take them, but through the networking, I found out that person was also then happened to be asked if they'd been vaccinated, and they said no, and they'd love to be vaccinated. And not only that, but they had a friend that would love to be vaccinated, and if they knew how, and they were out of Empire, and so they were catching a ride today to get their stuff taken care of and got registered to be vaccinated. I believe that there's an iceberg, and I believe those two people were the tip of an iceberg of our vaccinated crowd. And certainly there's vaccine reluctancy is part of it. But I do think, and I completely agree with you, Sean, and that's the point I was making about, for example, hospitalizations within our anecdotally sized population. There's no way to really use that effectively, because quite honestly, if we decided we'd hit herd immunity or close enough to it, or whatever our version of it was, and Tim agreed, and we opened the restaurants, and we had one hospitalization, as tough as I've been for the last year about saying, close it down, hold it down, stay safe, I would not think for 1 second about shutting our restaurants back down because we had one hospitalization. That could be you know, we could achieve herd immunity and somebody's going to get sick and they're going to have underlying causes and they're going to end up in the hospital. And that just wouldn't be reasonably reflective of an overall risk level for the entire county. And Dr. Ryan might disagree with me on that, but it's just so anecdotally small that it's almost impossible to use it as a guideline. So I completely agree with you. And that's where I think the firewall, once we've got everybody wearing the magic anti-COVID cloak in the form of the vaccine, that's when I feel like we can do those things and with confidence. So I think the all hands on deck is a valid thing, because I think that we have identified several new strategies this last week. And I think there's even more we can do. And it may come down to a phone bank out there if it takes, and you know, what we might do is think maybe we think we've caught all the 70-year-olds and we actually aren't near as close as we thought. And we might look at the most high risk populations and still establish some small phone banks out to people of some kind that Dr. Ryan can manage to maintain security and, you know, HIPAA and all that kind of stuff, and really start closing this thing into where we have a level of confidence that, you know, at some point we've got to move on. And I don't feel like we're there right now, but I feel like we could potentially be there within those weeks. And personally having orchestrated some of those public outreach methods where we had to reach the individual people, I'm convinced that if Dr. Ryan can give us can approve a framework within which privacy is respected, that a team of people working with those people in our public health department, for example, that are managing the phones, we can go all out. And we're really going all out, not just on behalf of safety. The reason we'd be going all out is so we can make it faster. We'd be going all out on behalf of our businesses. And because we know that we're going to get there, it's just a matter, do we get there in May? Do we get there in June? Do we get there in July? And I would suggest that our businesses have endured enough pain that it's our responsibility. I mean, I will sit on a phone bank as long as I have to for hours to help make this happen, or I'll stuff the envelopes, or I'll do whatever it takes that we determine is the right method to get there and to have those businesses as open as we're trying to do through this measure. So again, and the last thing I'll say is about, sure, that's it. The last thing I'll say is that as far as the dates go, that's exactly why I'm saying we need to put some kind of level out there that shows near certainty that we're all out on this thing, that we're all out on it today if we agree to this. And then we're all out on it in terms of what we actually write and sign by Tuesday. And then we're revisiting the thing by 5/18 so that we have a reasonable expectation that, yeah, we are getting close enough. We need that thing written and these places will be open, because you don't have to open them 2 or 3 weeks earlier so they can hire their people. We just need to let them know that they will be open by this date. And I think if by 5/18 we can determine that we're virtually certain that we'll have them open by, 5/26, 5/27, so that then that staff has been scheduled and ready to come in on those days and be ready for that weekend. Then, so I'm not suggesting waiting till Memorial Day to make the decision. I'm a businessman. I know that doesn't work. You can't call me up and tell me to get to work on that house on Tuesday on Monday. You can't call me on Monday and tell me to do that, because I've got a whole bunch of people to get lined up to go to work that probably had some other plans. And so I'm completely with you on that. And that's why I laid out that timeline a little bit ago. And personally, I also think we need to be revisiting our progress every week. And possibly even more often than that. So we're like watching our progress towards that goal that Tim gives us a thumbs up.
I want just to say one real quick thing about herd immunity. I mean, first off, my understanding is no one has really even defined exactly what that is with respect to this virus and what the variants are. And I kind of feel like we're moving the goalposts, right? I mean, originally, to George's point, we were talking about hospital capacity, and remember way back when we talked about doing a 2 or 3 week lockdown to flatten the curve. Now we've come up with this new standard, which I think is unachievable, right? I mean, particularly based on the fact that 25% of the population is potentially unvaccinatable at the moment. And if another 20% of those who are, or 30%, we're not going to get there. And I haven't heard any comments on natural protection from folks who are COVID survivors. So I think there's a good reason not to actually, I think there's a great reason to push as hard as we can on this, but I think it's really an equation about balancing public safety, balancing COVID fatigue balancing economic interests and not tying it to some unachievable goal. That's kind of new.
I think I just must be more of an optimist.
Well, if I might interject, a couple things. One, the snapback, just as an example, to your point, Sean, every one of the metrics is in and of itself flawed, particularly for a county of our size. That's why I suggested we use all of them in consideration together, and create what is in essence the proverbial fan. And if we have the unfortunate occasion to reach that point, then we snap back. But the likelihood of us meeting all of those metrics simultaneously, whether it be 2 hospitalizations and 300 per 100,000 and a test positivity simultaneously at 7.5%, the likelihood of us reaching all of those, for which we have not yet at any point during this pandemic, creates a scenario that it's really that proverbial wall that if we get to that wall where we have bigger problems and we should snap back anyway.
That was my point.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to create. I'm not trying to create these unattainable or metrics that really don't apply to us. You know, to Randy's point, half a person hospitalization, suddenly we're closing. I am not suggesting that at all. I'm trying to suggest a comprehensive look and a comprehensive line, at which point, if we cross that line, we can all agree we should probably go back, right? And similarly, I don't know that I would tie a more opening or loosening of restrictions only to reaching some level of vaccination rate, whatever that might be. I'm not suggesting that at all either. It's going to be a combination of things, right? It's going to be, what is our case count here in the county? What is the case count and hospitalization rate in the state? And a number of different variables that I think we need to consider anyway in looking at that. So rest assured, nothing on either side of that coin is going to be based on a single variable or a single metric and level of that metric. I don't think, for all the reasons you guys have stated, are reasonable and or achievable necessarily in and among themselves.
Thank you for that. And what it sounds like to me is that there's not a lot of difference between us about what we're calling the snapback metric. I think there's some daylight on a date that we would want to set a goal that we would be in clear. And I'm feeling pretty stubborn. The May 16th is a very meaningful day. May 16th is the day that every restaurant in the Denver metro area is going to start hiring employees, if not sooner, right? And I don't, that's the date that I would prefer that we set as a goal to get into clear. And I'm totally fine with, you know, I agree with Randy's observation that this resolution that's in front of us is not ready for a vote right now. And we need to give Dr. Ryan some time to build those metrics. And if we could agree on the 16th, I think that would be great. If we could do so today, I think that would be great, because the restaurants that are listening can start making plans.
And I would note is we can agree to a goal of the 16th, and if the conditions on the ground change, of course, we're not going to honor that. We're going to make the adjustments that are necessary.
Can we agree that one of the metrics Dr. Ryan's going to build will be some level of vaccination?
Can Dr. Ryan, can you even put together your fan conglomerate formula by next Tuesday?
He said he could, yeah.
I don't know what a fan conglomerate metric is, but
You invented it.
yes, I can do my best to put together what I think. I think we all agree on the proverbial fan. There you go. The proverbial fan and the snapback metrics. I think we all really agree on that fundamentally. It's the other metrics and the other things that we look at that I don't think we're completely on the same page yet. So to answer your question, yes, I think I can have those together next week, that we can have a similar discussion of whether we should include something else or we should include a different version of that metric, whatever the case may be.
I want to just quickly address, we've got a typed question in here. Would a theoretical level clear impact other industries? My understanding of level clear is that it is no capacity restrictions in any industry. Also, Beth texted me to remind me that Marty had a left question about the duration of vaccines, the duration of their efficacy. And I know, Tim, I heard it from you. Well, why don't I just let you address that question about what that headline about 6 months means?
It means so far the data that they've collected and actually looked at and analyzed suggests that at the 6-month mark, there is significant, there's still significant antibody response, meaning, and they're actively obviously collecting data all along the way. So I imagine in a few months, we're going to hear, it turns out after looking at the 9-month data, that there are still robust antibody response after 9 months. That is an ongoing question and answer that is going to continue on. I know that Pfizer and Moderna are looking at that in earnest and are adjusting not only the vaccine manufacturing now, but looking at the booster shot if that's needed, right? If after 12 months you're at 60% efficacy, do you really need another double dose of the vaccine? The answer to that question is probably no. You're going to need a single dose to get you back up to that 95% efficacy level. Anecdotally, in this state, what they have looked at from surveillance data, their data suggests that both Moderna and Pfizer are offering actually that 95% efficacy that the clinical trials bore out many, many months ago. So anecdotally, looking at breakthrough cases here in the state, they're finding that the efficacy rate is in fact 95% for both Pfizer and Moderna, which is great news. It just further proves what they have already found in the clinical trial. So I imagine that efficacy or that duration will grow as they analyze that data, and we'll hear in a couple months that it turns out it's 9 months now, and it turned right. It's not this is what we only think now, but this is the data we've analyzed. So yeah, 6 months is what you heard on the news, but the news is no matter what channel you subscribe to, they're very good at screwing up the message of it isn't just 6 months. They've only looked at 6 months worth of data so far, and they show robust antibody response at the end of that 6 months. So,
thank you. Yeah, so it's the way I've tried to keep it straight in my head is it's at least 6 months.
At a minimum, so far, yes.
Okay, so I want to go back and Randy, you responded to my question about May 16th with a question about a vaccination metric. My preference is to have a vaccination metric as an or. If we're talking about case counts, test positivity rates, and hospitalization rates as an and metric, then maybe on the side is, or if we hit vaccination of a certain percentage, all of this goes away or something like that.
I think those are the kind of details that are best left to doctor. I wouldn't choose the ands or the ors. I think we decided that we were deferring to, rather than dictate to our epidemiologist what is an appropriate understanding of safety. I think that's best left to him. I'm not at all disrespectful to your thought. I just don't know that we should. I mean, my feeling is that I don't care whether it's an and or an or, but I think it should be whatever he feels works best. I kind of see it, and I would probably differ from Dr. Ryan on this one, but I'm differing, like all of us, from speaking as a lead accredited professional with a degree in passive solar design and a lot of experience in carpentry and contracting and spreadsheets, none of which has anything to do with this. I think an or, because I think if we achieve the vaccination level, then hell, let's go for it. That said, I've heard Tim say plenty of things today that have convinced me that he's not completely in agreement with that. And it's a little more complex. And I'm going to trust him on that to figure out an equation that makes sense. So.
Yeah, and for the record, I appreciate all of your comments and I appreciate all of your input, but it isn't good. My opinion is what it is. And it may align sometimes with you and it may not align other times. But to your point, George, I think if we reached a vaccination rate of, just as an example, 70%, it's unlikely we're going to get to the other ones, meaning we're not going to have that many hospitalizations or fatalities or case count, right? So they sort of cancel each other out instantly. By achieving one, you're certainly not going to get to the others. And that's obviously the goal of vaccines and the efforts that are undergoing across the entire country, is to get to that point. So we don't have to have these conversations anymore about this metric or that metric. We know with confidence that we can slow the spread of the virus. And that's really the other thing that I'm thinking about, just for your knowledge, right? If we open up and then we have 30 cases, my staff is not able to, and we are one of the few counties, I might add, we're the one of the few counties that are continuing to contact trace every single case. And we have vowed to do that, and we're going to continue to do that. But there's a point at which my staff is no longer able in a week's time to contact trace 30 cases. It's just not possible. So there is a threshold that my staff, and yes, I could hire more staff, but by the time you get to that point, it's too late, right? We've achieved that level and it's sort of too late. So that's one of the things that is in my mind too, is what is the reasonable caseload that my staff could handle in a week to help contain any outbreak or any sort of surge that we may or may not have in this county. It's a staffing issue too. It's not, yes, 100 cases wouldn't kill us, but it would certainly put my staff down for a few weeks.
Why have the other counties why have they abandoned contact tracing?
Sheer volume.
Oh,
Basically, Jefferson County, for instance, Jefferson County, I don't even, this is April, probably 4 months ago, Jefferson County was calling about 1 in 10 cases, just trying, because that's the staffing they had. It got to the point where basically CDPHE ran out of staff to lend to counties to continue to do that. And when CDPHE basically said, we can't help you anymore, the county said, well, okay, there's nothing we can do about it then, because we only have the staff to contact 1 in every 100 cases or whatever the number might be. We've managed to keep our case counts low enough that the staff we do have has been able to manage and contact trace every single one of them. There may have been 1 or 2 that fell through the cracks, but for the most part, we've gotten all of them. And we're going to continue to do that as best we can, because from a public health and epidemiological perspective, that is our second best defense, is identifying cases and identifying contacts and making sure that they're either A, vaccinated, or B, going to get vaccinated, or C, isolating the way they should do that. So,
yeah, I guess I would just note that Tri-County Jeffco, they made this plan to go clear based on the passage of time on May 16th, knowing full well that they were no longer honoring the contact tracing. So it's not like it would put us in a situation that's different than our neighbors, should that happen, which I certainly hope that it doesn't. And I'm not in any way suggesting that we abandon our contact tracing. I just wanted to point that out.
Right.
no, we
Sounds
won't.
like you're heading towards sending, and I'm not trying to speak as a chair at all. I'm just thinking out loud, and there was a message I wanted to attach to this, that we're heading towards sending Tim out to come back to something to us with something that we can pass on Tuesday, that we can achieve hopefully consensus on. If it's a 2-to-1, it's a 2-to-1, and no hard feelings depending on how it goes or who goes which way. But the other thing I want to say is sometimes you read the texture of what's coming up in front of you and you start seeing stuff taking shape. And so regardless of the comments that we've made about some areas that we can improve on finding those people that have seemed unfindable till now, the very fact that we have been able to continue to contact trace, and what I will still carry to my dying day is saying that we were under, in my opinion, a pretty serious threat as a small county sitting on a conduit carrying 150,000 people a day. And we did reach those numbers again on the weekends this last year on some occasions because of the crush of COVID recreation and our exposure to a reasonable percentage of them. That the fact that we've been able to amass these clinics, get these vaccinations done that we have, been able to show at least the capacity to vaccinate, contact trace, and keep this place safe is a real tribute to everybody that, Tim and the crew that we've been talking to today. It's, you know, it's continues to be a source of pride in the county that even if there's some areas that we're lagging behind, we need to fix. And that's what this full court press is, we're talking about, is to close that last gap, that in general terms, everything here has gone beyond what our wildest expectations were back in March when we were saying, does anybody have a mask? And it's really, so I want to leave Tim with that today after this conversation.
I want to say one last thing about Tim's assignment. In my mind, the assignment is not to create new goalposts to kick the ball through to get to the May 16th date. It's to figure out the snapback. I'm fully comfortable using the passage of time and alignment with Jeffco and Tri-County to go to clear, knowing full well that we can use our discernment and collective wisdom to move that date out or modify it if the conditions on the ground dictate that. But I think it's important, to George's point about the labor market and providing certainty. So that's kind of where my preference is in terms of not inventing something new there. But I'm totally open and expecting that we're going to have some guidance when it comes to the potential of going backwards, which I certainly hope we're not going to ever have to visit.
And clearly I've said something a little different, which is I'd like to see some health metrics that Tim feels are specific to our county that would be helpful and usable for our county a lot more than the obviously unusable ones that are in the current wording. Because I don't want to be unfair to businesses. I don't want to be unfair to businesses and shut them down by one hospitalization as one example.
Yeah, so Peter, go ahead.
It sounded like we were wrapping up on this, and I wanted to just ensure that I had understanding from the board as to the direction. What I gathered is that the board would like Dr. Ryan to work on the resolution that we've put together with legal so that we can bring something back to you on Tuesday. Is that the plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to add one thing, which is that also meets Dr. Ryan's approval.
Yes.
He could support, because it's important to me that whatever it is we're talking about on Tuesday is something that Dr. Ryan says, yes, I agree with this. I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah, agreed.
By virtue of the fact he's going to be the one creating it, I imagine he's going to agree with himself. But I mean, all of us are going to reserve the right to have different ideas when he comes up to his conclusions and we read it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I'm just going by what came up early in the meeting, in which he said that what I took from the first of the meeting was that this thing is written was not something that he could support from a health standpoint, but that he should speak to that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Peter. I think we're pretty much where we need to be. I don't think that we're going to get agreement today that May 16th or some other date is the best date. I will express that right now it feels like a hard line for me. And it's just an economic wound that I'm not ready to inflict. I do want to address something in the chat here, which is that this feels different than what the metro area is doing by setting a date and putting some snapback metrics together. I think it's different in writing. I don't think it's different in spirit, and that's because I fully expect that the public health officials in the metro area will continue to monitor this, and if they think they have a problem, they're going to change the plan. So that's all from me. If anybody else has any final words, otherwise I know that we have an executive session on the schedule.
No, I just say I really appreciate the collegial and professional tone of our conversation today. I know everybody has a lot of thoughts about it and strong feelings, and good work.
Same.
I agree.
So therefore, I move the board into executive session for the following purposes.
Get myself off mute. For the purpose of the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners pursuant to CRS 246402-4F to discuss personnel matters relating to the hiring of a county manager, but not regarding commissioners or elected officials, or to discussions of personnel policies generally. This may also include discussion of reorganization of the county manager's office and related matters, depending on our time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Should I leave?
We're
We're going
going on a
Get
different
out
line.
of here.
Oh, bye.
Bye, everybody. See you on the other side.
See ya. I'm the slow one here.